Could Sinosauropteryx, the first fuzzy dinosaur, be covered in simple tubular feathers like those predicted by Rick's theory? Some scientists were not convinced. Fortunately, Liaoning furnished another fantastic fossil with much more than fuzz.
Caudipteryx is a wonderful little animal. It's got these downy-like feathers covering all its body, and on the backs of its arms, it's got fairly short, stiff feathers in the sense of what we would call a modern bird feather. And at the end of the tail is a fan of feathers as well. When you look at the Caudipteryx feathers under a microscope, it's quite clear that you can see the rachis, you can see the barbs, and in some places you can even just make out what you think are barbules. Whether you can make them out or not is irrelevant in a way, though, because when you look at the feather structure itself, it's clearly a flat vein. I mean, these barbs are being held together by something, and it only makes sense that they would be barbules. Towards the base of the feather, you get basically a downy or plumulaceous section of it. That, of course, is the part that doesn't have to hold together in a modern bird feather. In fact, it's tied into insulation more. And it's exactly that way in the Caudipteryx feathers. And if you take measurements of the lengths of the barbs and the approximate size of the barbules and the width of the shaft and everything, they line up absolutely perfectly with any modern bird. So you cannot distinguish them.
Though these were certainly veined feathers, they were not used for flight. They lacked the airfoil shape created by asymmetric growth. What purpose, then, could they have served?
Caudipteryx, I think, shows us a transitional stage where these dinosaurs have now developed another purpose for feathers. Dinosaurs, throughout their history, were animals that were very visual. They were animals that displayed in a lot of different ways. So if they wanted to attract a mate, they would have a big crest or a big frill on their head. And, or perhaps they wanted to scare off an enemy or a potential enemy. They could do the same kind of thing, develop these crests and frills and ridges and bumps and all kinds of things. And dinosaurs were very, very good at that kind of thing. Well, the trouble is if you do that in bone, it's a very expensive way to do it, and of course you can't change it. But if you've got something that's keratinous, that is keratin on the outside of your body, and it's lightweight, and you can shed it, then suddenly you've got a new way to display. There's a lot of things you can do with feathers that you just can't do with bones, and it's a cheaper way to do it. And I think that probably dinosaurs like Caudipteryx had developed these long feathers on the backs of the arms and at the end of the tail as a way of displaying. Now, that's not the only explanation, and of course it's hypothetical, and unless we go back in time, we may never know exactly what they were doing with those feathers.
Most biologists agree that Caudipteryx was a theropod dinosaur, but others were not so sure. They doubted that Caudipteryx really was a dinosaur. They claimed that it was just a flightless bird.
No one could deny that Caudipteryx had completely modern feathers on the tip of its tail and on its arms. But in 1998, when Caudipteryx was first described, there was a small but vocal group of critics that hypothesized that Caudipteryx was merely a flightless bird, sort of a Cretaceous ostrich. And consequently, they held that the case for the theropod origin of feathers prior to the origin of birds had yet to be demonstrated. For that reason, what was really required was a clear instance of feather-like structures or primitive feathers found in the skin of a theropod dinosaur that was, without a doubt, not a bird.
The dinosaur feather mystery was not yet solved, but Liaoning was about to reveal its next crucial clue: feathers on ferocious meat-eating raptor dinosaurs, much like those made famous in Jurassic Park. In 2001, a rock was split open to reveal mirror images of an extraordinary fuzzy raptor, Sinornithosaurus, affectionately nicknamed Dave. For paleontologist Mark Norell, it was the find of a lifetime.
Well, this specimen, I mean, when I first saw it, it just blew our mind. I mean, that our Chinese colleagues, Ji Chang, said they had something really special, that we had to get to China to see it. And when I saw this, it is just amazing. You know, you can just see it, everything is just spread out before you. And then it's completely covered with a fluffy or feathery body covering. And later, after a lot of study, the sort of details of this feathery covering sort of revealed themselves to us. But when we first saw it, it's apparent as what it is. It's a fluffy, feathered dinosaur. What we're seeing is the evolution of what we would call a feather of modern aspect, almost in action. I mean, the most primitive animals like Sinosauropteryx have just single filaments, and you can see some of that on this specimen here, which we call Dave. Mostly appear on the head and other places that you can trace individual filaments all the way down from their tip to where that they would have contacted the skin. And then finally, on the back of the trailing edge of the forelimb, we can see self-organized structures which form a herringbone pattern and really hint at a feather, a real feather of modern aspect, where you have a vein that's self-organized into these parallel barbs coming down and meeting the central shaft, and just in the exact place that one would expect to find them on the trailing edge of the forelimb.
Even with all this incredible evidence, there were those who still doubted that these were feathers.
It seems like everything that we've ever found before, whether it was Caudipteryx, that some people said was a flightless bird, wasn't conclusive enough. Then we found Dave. Clearly it was covered with a body covering. We felt that we were able to see feathers of modern aspect in it, but not everybody believed us. So we needed to find something better.
In 2002, they did. Mark Norell and his colleagues discovered another feathered raptor from Liaoning with irrefutable modern feathers, as this enlarged image shows.
This white line right here is the shaft, or the rachis, which goes down the center of the feather and is a tubular structure. And then emanating from that on each side, we have these black filaments, which are the barbs, which together form the vein of a feather. And
so the planar vein in this portion is likely to be held together by barbules,
right,
since we can see that in one particular spot, the feather vein has unzipped, just like we see in a modern bird.
Exactly. It's unzipped, and then down here it's zipped back together again. So.
There is no longer any doubt the raptor dinosaurs had feathers just like a modern bird. The case was closed. But these were not flying dinosaurs. Their feathers lacked the asymmetrical design that gives flight feathers their aerodynamic shape.
One thing we can tell is that what they didn't use feathers for, and that's that they didn't use feathers for the origin of flight. You can make some guesses, though. I mean, I think one of the best guesses, and something that a number of us have talked about for a long time, is that probably it had something to do with temperature control initially. And then as far as the development of the different kinds of feathers, from ones that cover the body to ones which are used for aerodynamic capabilities and things like that, it's at least conceivable that they were used as display structures, which were then later co-opted for the origin of flight. Now, usually, as paleontologists, we make a lot out of very little. We find one little bone or one little trace of feather and things like that. I mean, to find something which is just so beautiful and reads so well and is so convincing and so clear, all in one specimen, really makes this one of the great dinosaur specimens in the world.
These raptors seem to have wrapped it all up. But one final question remained. How did flight evolve?